Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Catherine Ng. I'm on the authors at Google team at Google Los Angeles. I'm very, very excited to welcome Chef David Chang and Peter Meehan today at Google Los Angeles. David Chang is the executive chef and owner of the Momofuku restaurant group, which spans 8 restaurants from New York City to Sydney and soon Toronto. Since opening the Noodle Bar in 2004, Dave has been honored with numerous awards from Food and Wine magazine, Bon Appetit, GQ Men of the Year, and of course, 3 James Beard Awards and 2 Michelin stars. Dave's first cookbook, Momofuku, was published in 2009, and he launched Lucky Peach, a quarterly food journal, last summer. Peter Meehan is also here today. He writes about food. He wrote for the New York Times for 4 years and has written for numerous food and travel publications. Peter collaborated with Dave on Momofuku, the cookbook, and he and Dave launched Lucky Peach last year in conjunction with McSweeney's. Today's conversation will be moderated by our own chef, Michael Brown. And if you haven't already, make sure you grab a copy of Lucky Peach and try one of Momofuku Milk Bar's cookies that we're serving today. And without further ado, I give you David and Peter.
Thanks for having us. Thanks, guys. Strange. I was telling Kat that we've been. I think I've been to every Google office in North America, and this is by far the most. The beach right here. This is amazing. But we're really honored to be here. Always happy to share our stories. And there's so many things to talk about in terms of what we do and Peter and I do. And one of the stories we'd like to share with you, a couple years ago when we started to do Lucky Peach, it was actually supposed to be an app, still may be an app, but it was in purgatory. And Peter decided to make a magazine out of the stuff that never made it to the final cut. So this whole weird magazine sort of happened, and
everyone thought it was a terrible idea.
It still is a terrible idea.
This is true.
And anyway, one of the things that people always want us to talk about is our time in Kyoto, in Japan in general, but our time in Kyoto because it's a part of Japan and the culinary world that not that many people know about. Kyoto probably has the oldest and richest culinary culture in the world. I was fortunate enough about 4 years ago to be invited by the chef, Murata-san. He is like this kingly figure in Japanese cuisine. Scares the hell out of me. Peter thinks he's a really nice guy. He is a nice guy, but he commands this presence. And anyway, he invited myself, a chef, and 2 chefs from the UK, Claude Bussey, Sat Baines, that are actually in the current issue of Lucky Peach, and Mike Anthony, the chef at Gramercy Tavern, and Mauro Colagreco, a chef from Mirazor in Menton, France, on the border of France and Italy, in the region of Nice. Anyway, we got to cook at various restaurants, and that was such an honor because Kyoto is extraordinary, insular. They're not necessarily xenophobic, but they don't want to share historically they haven't shared what they've learned over literally 1,500 years of cooking. And you get to work at these restaurants where they do stuff that you've never seen before, and we had access to it, and we're learning this stuff, and we were one of the first foreigners to actually see what was going on. Working in a restaurant that is over 1,000 years old. It's crazy. If you're a 300-year-old restaurant, it's considered young. To meet a chef, Murata's like the head of this whole group there, to meet a chef where he's a 15th generation chef. His family's been cooking for over 1,000 years. And to meet a farmer that they work with, who's also a 15th generation farmer. His family's been farming for over 1,000 years. And I didn't do my homework, but I can't imagine maybe there's a handful of farmers in the world that have that lineage. And it was quite fascinating. Like, he's somebody that forgets more about farming than we'll ever know about farming. And we're there in December, it's snowing, and I had the best strawberry I ever had in my life. I don't know how the hell he did it, but he just knew. And this farmer knew how each strawberry was going to taste in the different parts of his greenhouse. So there's this extraordinarily rich culinary tradition, and they let us in, and I told Pete, if we get a chance, let's go to Kyoto. And we got permission from Murata to film at Kikoii, and
You did Kikoii. My main memory of Kikoii was that, Dave and I are usually dressed like this, so I just rolled to Kikoii kind of dressed like this, and I didn't realize what a formal and beautiful restaurant it was, and he wore this like hand-tailored suit. He got on a GQ photo shoot, and then Murata
laughed at you.
Yeah, so that was my takeaway from dinner.
But there's so many interesting things about Kyoto because it's a bit different. I'm sure some of you have spent time in Tokyo, having lived there in Japan in various parts. But whenever I get to Kyoto, it's almost like a break from the insanity that is Tokyo. And actually, I've been to your Tokyo offices in Google, but it's crazy because the chefs there are like alpha males in this society. It's very weird. I've never been to a culture where being a cook is like the highest honor, because it's just been passed down, and it's something that it's so hard for any of us or a cook for us to understand and comprehend, that cooking has remained this high craft form, and it's not bankers, it's not people that work at Google that are really like the superstars of Kyoto. It's very strange to see it as chefs, and eating a meal there in Kikoii. Has anyone been to Kyoto and been to Kikoii? Okay, so it's pretty intense. And one of the cool things that they do at Kikoii is they have a fish shop. They purchase fish, and on the compound of Murata's compound at Kikoii, where all the cooks live, 27 cooks, his mother and his 2 daughters all live in the compound. And part of the compound they have, what looks like a very nice aquarium, but it is almost, it's really not good to be a fish. It's a process called ikejime. We talk about it a little bit in issue 2 of Lucky Peach, and there we question, and this is the first time where I started to question food and the status quo of food, because you just assume that fish is fresh when you get it at the supermarket,
And fresh fish is best.
where fresh fish is best. You assume that catching a fish right out of the water is going to be the best fish. And you hear it all the time, like, I want the freshest fish. Or you're at a sushi restaurant and you hear some Yahoo being like, this fish isn't fresh enough. Like, you don't even think about what the concept of fresh is. It's been handed down to you. Even if your innate instinct is to like shy away from it because it may smell bad or something, maybe that is fresh. Fresh is certainly not, it's very relative, but at the same time it's pretty objective if you think about how the Japanese view what fresh is. And this is probably the main thing that I learned. One of the major things I've learned in Kyoto was questioning what is fresh, because they have these fish in the tanks, and they're going to perform ikejime. Ikejime is the severing of the brain cortex and all the nervous system from the fish, and basically, long story cut short, it slows and controls the rigor mortis process. So, Japanese chef in Kyoto, where you serve it as sashimi or something, mostly as sashimi, you can control the flavor and the texture of the fish, and there's a optimal time, and it's not usually
Right out of the water.
not out of the water. If you eat most of the time, if you eat sushi or crudo in a restaurant, it's at least 4 or 5 days old. Sometimes it can go all the way to 2 weeks, but you want to age the fish, and there's a moment where that fish is going to be at its peak, and you can, using different culinary techniques, you can either preserve that fish to ensure that sweet spot, or basically it threw my entire notion of what fresh is. I always knew that if you have to ask the question, what is a fresh fish, it's not fresh.
But the thing is that fresh isn't actually a metric for deliciousness in fish, and that's what you learned with Murata-san at Kikoii when you learned about ikejime, which is like you spike the fish in the brain and then you drive a wire through its spine.
And it seems really gruesome, but it's actually an extraordinarily humane way to kill a fish.
That versus cutting open the gills and letting it bleed out on ice and asphyxiate. So it's a faster way of death, but it short circuits the natural, or the more common, the rigor mortis process that fish go through here. So it's a way of controlling the texture of the fish, which is really important in a raw fish preparation because otherwise you're just you have no other way of manipulating it. And then the other thing we saw when we were at Tokyo at Sada, he ages. This is this insane sushi restaurant where we had this brilliant meal, but he ages his tuna 10 days in the refrigerator. And it was the most amazing tuna we'd ever had. And he doesn't like modern refrigerators because they have fans in them, so he has like a huge block of ice.
It's as old school as you get.
Yeah. Because
if
the
he could
fan would dry out his fish.
If he could have no electricity in his restaurant, he would do that. Behind his sushi line with just him and his wife, 6 seats, it's just charcoal and block ice refrigeration. And I think for me, it's my favorite sushi restaurant in the world. And that's a whole nother topic. But a lot of people question his rice because he doesn't use aged rice, he uses fresh rice. But Sushi Sawada, if you ever get to Tokyo, please try to make a reservation because it's just fantastic. But overall, like Pete and I we're in this really amazing situation. We're very fortunate to travel all over the place, to come to places like Google or to go to places in Japan and to get access to places where most people wouldn't get access, very fortunate in that regard. Or like we got to go to Copenhagen and get to cook with Rene Redzepi all day long at Noma, which is, for the 3rd year in a row, won the best restaurant of the year and #1 restaurant in the world from Restaurant Magazine. So it's part of it is just for us to have fun and to document this process and to share this information with people that might be interested, which is what Lucky Peach was and continues to be. Pete just wrapped up the latest issue called America. We did an issue on American food, and somehow we continue to get the ability to do whatever the hell we want. I mean, Pete, you can talk about the latest issue.
Yeah, Daniel Patterson from Qua in San Francisco suggested the theme, like American cuisine, whatever that is. So we typically agree on a theme and then we get in a fight about how to approach it and then take that out in a couple of different ways. But this new one, I don't know, we've gotten really lucky with contributors. David Simon, who did Treme and The Wire, contributed an essay, wrote about Cambodian donut shops in California.
I mean, the question is, what is American food? I mean, so we took a weird perspective on it. We did a lot of different takes on it, but one of it was based on the movie Diner. Barry Levinson directed it in 1984, and I think it's Steve Guttenberg's finest hour. And it's sort of a look into Americana in the 1950s, and we did an entire issue out of it, basically. So we got to have fun and creatively way to do whatever we want in that regard. But part of it was we get to explore questions. I think I recently described, or was telling somebody about Lucky Peach. It's the culinary investigation of the mundane, because I think the best ideas, culinary ideas or non-culinary ideas, happen to be the ones that are staring you right in the face, the ones that people. I'm always trying to find this reaction from somebody that reads something or tastes something, and I want them to go like this, like, why didn't I think of that? That's so simple. Why didn't I do that? And that's what we're sort of after, that sort of elusive, very simple, but it's deceivingly complex idea or food. And, Peter does an amazing job in capturing that, I think, and we try to do it on the food end. And going back to the American theme, we were trying to figure out what the hell American food is. So it's just it's neither here nor there. I think that people don't even know how to describe it. So I think it's this generation of chefs are really trying to figure out what California food, not California food, but what American food is. Like California has a distinct cuisine. The South of America, southern states in America have a distinct cuisine. Even New England has a distinct cuisine. But nobody wants to cook it. Nobody wants to delve into it and figure out what the history is behind it and how do we represent what we do in America and find our own voice. And it's a little bit troublesome when we imitate so much of what's going on outside of America and try to bring it back to America. And I think that we have enough talent, we have enough resources, and we have enough savvy consumers like yourselves that come to our restaurants to further the American culinary calendar. Like, American cuisine is this melting pot, and we're not reflecting that enough. So it's our challenge and it's our struggle to sort of push that a little bit further and to find out what that is. So, I mean, you can't really decide what it is. I mean, we recently opened a restaurant in Sydney, and I posed a question to the journalists, like, what is Sydney cuisine? And they're like, it's everything. I was like, well, because they were trying to pigeonhole us into what kind of food we were going to cook. And I said, instead of trying to figure out what kind of food we're going to cook and categorizing it so it can be in some Zagat guide or some blog, like this is Asian food, this is French food, I think the most important thing that we need to be concerned about is how delicious is it, right? Like, who cares what kind of food it is, as long as it's really tasty? Does it bring joy to you when you leave the restaurant and you think about it? That to me is the most important thing. And I think that's what we need to find in America is like, what is delicious in America and how do we support that and how do we further that? So.
I'm going to defer to him on questions.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I mean, this is an amazing opportunity to have both of you here and talking about Lucky Peach. I've, started reading Lucky Peach, and the first thought I got, was just how candid, the writing was. You could really speak to chefs. It was a great voice, when you're talking about, the PTSD, part about, our consistently stressful lives and what it takes to really get into, make it or not in this industry. So, I think I could say, on behalf of a lot of chefs, thank you for this publication. First question we really have is, Lucky Peach, envelops a lot of great writing, a lot of art, a lot of graphics. What was the inspiration for that? And did you find it's hard to maintain a color, full color publication? I mean, when there's really not a lot of that still happening now.
Yeah, I mean, it was, we were shooting video to put into an app, and that is, in some sort of limbo sarcophagus right now, but I like buying records and books and physical media, so, and we have friends at McSweeney's who we had wanted to work with for years, and when they heard about it, we cooked up this idea for a magazine, and it just worked somehow, and it's continued.
We really want to do new media.
You really wanted to do new media. I wanted to do dead media.
Yeah.
So that's like
and that's just funny how it all works out.
Yeah.
And we literally are doing the oldest, most deadest form of media possible.
Yeah.
So.
The term fusion cuisine went through a 30-word phrase with foodies, and now it's vogue again, thanks to the great chefs like you and Roy Choi and Sang Yoon. What do you make of this change? And and how come everybody still who's the leaders in this fusion, this new fusion is Korean? How does that work out?
I don't know. It's great to see in LA, like, people always come back to New York being like, man, the Asian food is so fucking awesome. And it is. Like, you can eat so well here. If you just go to Chinatown or Koreatown, or I don't know why the Vietnamese or Southeast Asian food, there's no town, Thai town or Vietnamese town here. Is there?
Yeah, very small.
A little player. I know there's an amazing one out in Orange County, like past out, but
all kinds of towns here.
yeah. So you guys have the ethnic food down in spades, and I just think that it's just reached a point where a lot of cooks want to just do what they want to do, and not necessarily for the customer, but what's delicious and what's interesting to them. You see that with Roy. You see that obviously with Sang. You see that with in California with the Mission Street Chinese guys. And I think the more we have of that, the more it's not necessarily fusion. It certainly is fusion, and I mean, I just hate the concept of people trying to categorize something that, isn't what. Basically, if you take anybody that's cooking whatever type of food using some type of Asian ingredients, if you take a chef from New York that's French, Jean-Georges is using more Asian ingredients than, say, Roy is. But because Roy is Korean, he's labeled as this Korean-American chef that's doing this fusion cuisine. But nobody's ever going to say anything against Jean-Georges, who, I admire. I'm not talking crap about Jean-Georges. I'm talking about how he's perceived and how he's marketed to the public. He's this great French chef that has this repertoire of Asian ingredients in his arsenal. He's cooking French food with an Asian twist. And one sounds better than the other. And one seems like this weird hodgepodge mutant food, but the reality, it's the same thing, right? People are using ingredients from different cultures. One's accepted and one is a fledgling concept. So I'm all for change as long as it sort of furthers, again, like trying to make something better. And I think, again, just the word fusion and the word of trying to categorize stuff ultimately fails. So.
In Lucky Peach number 2, you allude to the sweet spot, also known as when someone's at their best moment. Do you still worry about that? Is that still part of your daily thought process?
Yeah. I like sports a lot, and like when the Lakers are on, and they're like, oh, Kobe Bryant's turning 34. This is his last year. The Lakers didn't make it to the finals. He's over. It's done. And I'm like, the fuck, man. But I don't think that people like to embrace the concept of not death per se, but the slow descent to where they're not going to be as good as they once were. Right. And I tend to focus on that quite a bit. And I think it's liberating in a way, because if you know that, everything has its peak and everything begins and everything dies, and somewhere along the way you're going to be better at something than you were in the past. And I think a lot of people, particularly chefs, never really think about it. Chefs were the most stubborn. We're just so fucking stubborn. It's ridiculous. And we think that we're going to get better. We're just always going to get better. And I see that in athletes. It's like the quarterback, like Brett Favre, who never wants to retire because he thinks he's as good as he was when he was 28 years old. It's not the case. And no matter what, even if you're in the humanities, you're going to not be as good as a judge when you were like 50 years old. When you're 80 years old, you might not. You know what I mean? It's just accepting that fact, I think, sort of makes you smarter, makes you more efficient in terms of how you think and how you approach and how you're creative. And maybe you may not be as creative, or you may not endeavor to do as many things as you did when you were younger, but you're a smarter player, you're a smarter chef, and you may be a better leader. And so instead of being I
think the relativity of that, how you can change as you mature, is the reason I don't agree with you that there is a sweet spot in life.
See, this is where we are. No, I mean, it all started with...
You thought ramen was a bad idea for an issue?
I did, but I'm wrong all the time. I admit it. You never do. There's a theory out there that there'll never be another 400 baseball hitter ever again, and I don't think there ever will. But Peter maintains this notion that it's going to happen. I think that it's never going to happen. Not that there isn't the talent to do so. It's just never going to happen. And I would rather focus on what we can do now rather than what is conceivably possible. And we're not going to get into the baseball thing today right now,
I mean, I really love that you guys disagree, you know, because it really comes out in the magazine, and it you know, really brings up, you know, discussion and argument, and you know, I love that dynamic about Lucky Peach and you guys. Going back to the ramen talk, you know, ramen noodles originated from China, and there are, you know, types of noodle soups and dishes in Asian culture, different, but none seem to have really captured the American imagination and appetites as well as ramen, except maybe, you know, pho. Why do you think that is? What is it about ramen that really is romantic?
I mean, I think the impetus to do an issue on ramen is because there is a great story, you know, and it's relatively recent, like kind of last 100 years or when ramen was invented, you know, as a dish and became prominent. You know, then Momofuku Ando, the man who invented instant noodles, has like super compelling story. So there was just a lot of stories behind it to tell, which is the reason we did the issue. But why ramen is so popular, I don't know, because it's cheap and you can eat it in college and then you know what it is. I mean, I feel like there's a gateway drug aspect that you know what ramen is, you know, and then now you can go to a ramen shop and get a real, you know, bowl of ramen instead of just a brick. And
It's also a very social atmosphere as well. You can share and talk about it, make noises eating it. And,
That's the thing. That's in America.
Right,
People
right.
in
yeah.
America don't know how to eat noodles.
Okay.
no,
out there.
I learned that in Tokyo with Dave because I ate professionally for a brief time in my life. So I thought
It's
I was
embarrassing
good
watching
at
Peter
eating
eat noodles. I'm
And,
surprised he knows how to use chopsticks.
And we went to ramen shops, and I just didn't realize you're just supposed to like huff
supposed to
the
talk.
noodles while they're like really hot, and I was like taking my time, and like it was shameful. I was getting like little 40-pound Japanese women were just crushing these bowls around. I'm like, it's so hot, I just need another minute. But yeah, we don't actually know how to eat ramen for as much as we like it turns out.
And I would slowly move my seat further away from Peter. You're like, Chef, I don't know who this guy is. But yeah, you have to eat it smoking, boiling hot, or the noodles are going to overcook, and that's just never going to change. Like in the first issue, we talk about this. I call him the M&M of ramen, Ivan Orkin, and this New York. This New York guy serving basically Jewish comfort food in the form of ramen to Japanese people. It's extraordinarily good ramen, and he's trying to open up something in America. And you know, we're talking about how it's going to work. And I said, dude, your ramen, like you're going to have to change your noodles because Americans are not going to eat it as they should, and they're going to complain that the noodles are soggy because by the time they get to the temperature that they want to eat it at, it's going to be overcooked. So. You know, he's just like, what am I going to do? He's like, what should I do? I was like, I don't have an answer. So, yeah. It's one of those frustrating things, little things.
What do you guys think is the most punk rock thing happening now in cuisine and food?
For me, I think it's this guy, Alex Stupak in New York. He was the pastry chef at Alinea when it opened up. Extraordinarily influential at that restaurant and the success it had. And he left to become the pastry chef at WD-50, Wiley Dufresne's it's such an important restaurant in New York. And he was at the vanguard of not just being one of the best chefs, but pastry chefs, but one of the few people in the world that actually created new techniques. And just in general, I think in any field, there's few people that actually create something new, right? And he was one that created new techniques that other chefs would use. And he's a good friend of ours, and he was always talking about, I just want to cook Mexican food. I think it's fascinating. And you know, I think because of the internet or whatever, we sort of, I hate using the word postmodern, but the cooking world reached this weird state of like what he was doing wasn't punk rock anymore. Like creating new techniques and sort of being at the vanguard was for him being rebellious, breaking down rules and creating his own rules. And when he saw that there were legions of cooks copying him and following his rules, he just thought it was over. And in a way, he was completely correct. And I thought the coolest thing he could have ever done was tell everybody I'm going to quit cooking modern cuisine and I'm going to make Mexican food. And people thought he was out of his mind. He opened up a restaurant called Empeon in the West Village, and that slowly turned into taqueria. And recently opened this place called Empeon Cucina, and it's his take on Mexican food. It's more dish heavy, and I think it's just fantastic. It's delicious because Mexican food, we just don't have a good representation of it in New York. And he's doing extraordinarily good things, and knowing Alex, it suits him. And I don't know of anyone that's done anything as awesome as that. Sort of like just turning his back on everything he knew and relearning. I think that takes a lot of balls. So.
I think Brooks Headley, who's the pastry chef at Del Posto, he just cut a 7-inch record with one of the dudes from No Age, and it's actually punk rock.
But he was, but he is a punk rock. He was before he became a pastry chef. He was in like hardcore punk bands, so that doesn't count.
I mean,
he really is a rock star.
It was a concise answer.
That's awesome. In the first issue, you asked Uneo-san about his feelings about tradition and authenticity. What are your feelings about that?
Who do we make fun of?
No. We asked Ueno-san at Bar
Oh.
Five. I mean, I think authenticity is one of those traps that people get caught up in when they talk about food, specifically like ethnic or ethnic food in America. Like, if it'll always be like, oh, that place isn't authentic, or oh, it's all Chinese people there. It's like really authentic, and it's not. It's this false measurement instead of like appreciating the deliciousness of the food and judging the restaurant on its own merits. And I think that kind of goes back to what Dave was saying about categorizing cuisine, it being less useful than responding to the restaurant or the food specifically that's being served. But tradition is tradition, and that exists. Authenticity, I think, is sometimes a false measurement to judge food by, or it's not. It's used more like a cudgel than it is like a precision instrument.
I think it's extraordinarily stupid.
See, that was a concise answer.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, it's like we're at this restaurant getting drinks last night, and it says like the best hamburger ever. That was the name of their hamburger. I was like, this is the dumbest name I've ever heard. And trying this pursuit of authenticity, I think, overshadows the pursuit of delicious. And you know what? You have restaurants that import people from Italy, entire fucking towns,
to make pasta.
And you know what? Like, even if they import the flour, pasta, there's like 3 ingredients: flour, water, eggs. The water is extraordinarily important. It is full of microbes. It's full of things that the alkaline content could be different. These are all things that can dramatically change the taste of pasta, the structure of pasta. And people are so caught up in pursuing the marketing aspect of authenticity. It's like, we serve authentic Italian food. No, you're not. You're not in Italy. Shut the fuck up. Just think of it vice versa, right? You've probably been abroad, like you go to, let's say you're in Shanghai, right? And you see some expat serving authentic New York style pizza. And your reaction is going to be what? No, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. There's like, soy sauce on the pizza. What the fuck are you doing? So that's the thing. I think it's easier to understand authenticity when you take an expat's point of view. It's like, or I always use because I did meet a German guy from Munich that wanted to make American barbecue. He's like, I'm gonna make it authentic. It's gonna be just like Memphis style barbecue. And I was like, no, it's not gonna be Memphis style barbecue, because you're, number one, not using the beef that's coming or any of the meats from America. You're not using any of the wood from America. You're not even using the workers, the hands, the invisible stuff, all the things that make something special, that tastes the way it does at a unique area. So don't tell anybody you're serving authentic American
And it
barbecue.
even goes to how you eat. I mean, it's like the difference between the way we eat ramen here and the way they eat ramen in Japan. If you're not eating it the same way, if you don't have the same cultural association with how you relate to that food, that, you know, inhibits the potential for it to be authentically authentic. So, I mean, we both think that authenticity is kind of like a red herring, but it should be about the deliciousness of the food, not about like the story that goes along with it.
And I think it's more important, instead of getting the authenticity down, is understanding what the flavors are of a particular region and paying respect to that. And that, again, using Alex Stupak as an example, here we are in New York, and he's cooking food from various regions of Mexico. He's somebody that has a really encyclopedic knowledge of like flavor profiles from Mexico, but you know, we don't have the same ingredients. So he's gonna try to mimic, but not copy those flavors. And in a way, it's not Mexican anymore, it's New York. And I think that's really important.
I think one question that probably everyone in this room has is, why is there not a Momofuku in LA yet?
Wow, almost happened like 4 or 5 times, different people. It's a sore subject for Peter, because it almost opened up in his favorite hotel. Don't say it, because I'll get in trouble.
Okay. I just could have stayed there for like free. It would have been amazing.
But
It's really all about me, our relationship.
I think it'd be tough to open up in LA. It's not that I don't like to, I just think it's a fast food culture. People have to drive, people don't drink. There's like few restaurants that do multiple turns. And it's hard enough. And I don't know, like maybe we'll do something, but I knew it was a bad idea to sort of think about opening a restaurant in LA just because it would break up my layover to Australia. And that's not a good enough reason to open up a restaurant. In fact, it's a really, really bad reason. So as much as I'd like to, because the produce here is so great, and I've always maintained that the best restaurants in the world, at least in America, should easily come from Southern California, or I mean, obviously San Francisco. Just this, California just produces amazing things. So that is the draw, because the product you can hear, you have tomatoes already, the salads, like when we got here, the first thing we wanted, like, let's eat salad, like it's so good.
Yeah, we have like apples and cabbage.
Yeah,
Most of the year.
you can't grow apples like we do, but everything else is is really amazing. So that's the temptation to open up a restaurant, is because the produce here is so amazing. And but you know, I'm never going to say never, but it's most likely never going to happen.
We just have to make those trips. Harold McGee wrote in one of the Lucky Peach issues that mold actually enhances some of the flavor of produce. Speaking of produce, and David and Peter are doing a lecture tonight at UCLA, the Science and Food series, about the role of microbes in our food. Can we get a little preview of what you will be talking about tonight?
Mold equals flavor. Microbes equal flavor. You don't see it, but it does. And so much of what we're doing right now at our test kitchen is developing misos and soy sauce and fermented products, vinegars, all these things that are extraordinarily delicious, full in umami, but are controlled rot. And calls into question again our concept of what is fresh, what is delicious, and sort of ties into, basically a lot of it circles and hovers around this taboo subject of MSG, which I think, using some terms from the UCLA guys, I jokingly say, but sometimes I'm not joking when I say that clearly suggests a form of racism.
The fear of MSG.
Yeah, fear of MSG, which people say they're allergic to, and I'm not saying I just believe that it happens to be possibly more psychosomatic than anything else, because there's nothing that proves that MSG, in fact, all the studies, there have been many that try to prove that MSG creates this Chinese restaurant syndrome, there's no evidence at all. And in fact, everything supports that it's psychosomatic. And we serve Asian food. In part, I'm particularly interested in it because we serve a lot of Asian ingredients, and people say like, oh, I can't eat your food because there's soy sauce in it. But they're, happy going to Babbo eating a plate of pasta with tomatoes and Parmesan cheese.
Both of which are ingredients that are rich in
Glutamic acid, which equals umami, and the only difference between that and artificially made MSG is they add one molecule of sodium so you can disperse the glutamic acid. Your body digests and breaks down glutamic acid the same way as one would eat a bag of Doritos or anything else. So like Doritos, a plate of Parmesan is extraordinarily high in MSG.
Yeah, one of the ongoing things in the magazine is campaigning for MSG.
At the very least, no, it really is true.
No,
I'm not
it's
joking.
like the
Because
first issue we had Harold explain the whole birth of Chinese restaurant syndrome, which was a title of a letter in the New England Journal of Medicine that was a question.
written by a
report.
Chinese guy. That sucks.
That's on that dude. And then we had another article later about how there are flavor receptors in your tongue for umami, for glutamic acid. It's just something, because it's part of, it's savoriness. It tells you that food is good. So eventually we'll hope to convince people that MSG is okay, which is not to say that you cook
I
cook with like
But
MSG,
even here's the question: is the reason why don't we use MSG? We use all sorts of other ingredients that people don't have any problem not questioning, but it's like the most taboo thing you could possibly add, and people know nothing about it. They believe the media, they believe what's been told to them, and it's just one of these things that, until proven otherwise, all facts prove to the contrary, that MSG is not bad for you. And it's not that we want to promote MSG, it's just let's care about real issues, not about, And in a way, that's why I say it's maybe a form of racism, because you have people that are like, I can't eat this. I can't eat Chinese food. I can't eat Thai food. I can't eat Korean food. But they can eat Italian food, and that pisses me off.
Well, I would like to now open up the questions for anyone on the floor who has questions for them, and we have a microphone in the back. You can step up.
No, we can hear you. I'll just repeat. You're fine. Oh yeah.
Hi guys, my name is Jess. I'm a huge admirer of both of you guys. I have a couple comments and a question, but hopefully you won't mind, given that much of my disposable income has gone to fund Momofuku in New York. My favorite issue has been the sweet spot issue, especially the apricot article.
Adam Goldner.
Yeah, that article, I think you guys kind of alluded to this earlier, pretty much like redefined how I define fresh fruits. And I've been lecturing, my husband's like, okay, I get it. We're not gonna get apricots here. We'll have to fly to Uzbekistan or wherever it was that you guys featured.
Really expensive to go to Tajikistan, and it's
Yeah.
a really long flight. There are no direct routes.
So I contacted that vendor to see if I can get some delivered, but that's ongoing. Anyway, that was a great article, and I've been also talking to people about the ikejime, and I don't cook as much as I should, but your recipes is something that I've put on my refrigerator just for inspiration.
We do those funny recipe layouts because we know, at any cooking magazine you've ever bought, like if you cook like one or two things out of an issue, you're like, that was useful. So we just try to make them readable, and if you read through it, you at least learn something about it, whereas if it was just like a column of text, maybe you wouldn't be motivated to do that.
Great. And in terms of the restaurants, David, I absolutely love the shaved foie gras at Co. And if you ever get rid of that, I will be very upset. I heard you have a tendency to take stuff off your menu once they reach that popularity.
Yeah. We're lucky that people like that dish, but unlucky that people like it enough where if we took it off the menu, people would be pissed. So we sort of have this unwritten rule where we won't replace a dish unless we can exceed its deliciousness and how people perceive it. So we're going to have that on for a while. But if we were in California, we'd have to take it off.
That's right.
You guys have the dumbest legislation ever.
Chicago had it, but I think they found a loophole, right?
No. Yeah, they repealed that partly because, I don't know. If you guys aren't aware, California has banned the sale and consumption of foie gras, which is extraordinarily short-sighted, I think. And there's other issues for anti-foie protesters to tackle, like commodity chicken that goes into chicken McNuggets and other terrible things that go into food. But this is just a ridiculous topic. Like 200,000 people a year consume foie gras. It's like something ridiculously small. But it's something that we dealt with in New York, and unfortunately that the legislators love, because it's just their ability to pass this is their ability to tell voters that we care about animal rights and the welfare and the environment, because it's such a nonsensical topic that nobody really cares about. So it's a Pyrrhic victory for them.
Yeah, and then in terms of, I guess, non-controversial foods, your kimchi at Noodle Bar, as a fellow Korean, quite proud. Your mother must be very proud.
She thinks it's too salty.
She says it's too salty?
Yeah.
I ate the entire jar by myself. I hate admitting that, but I did it, and your wait staff kind of stared at me.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah. And then finally, my question is, I know you spend a lot of time outside of the kitchen now, and my question to you is, how do you still stay involved with all the different restaurants that you guys have around the world?
Man, living out of a suitcase. No. We have a lab. It's a struggle. I'm sure that if you asked Larry Page and Sergey of Google, how the hell do you guys keep the spirit of Google alive as you guys have grown into this massive company, right? It's not the upstart that it once was, right? How do you maintain that philosophy to stoke the fire, to stoke the creativity, to stoke people to be excited to work for Google? And I think that's the struggle that I'm always trying to figure out. I don't have that answer, because we do have so many employees. I never thought I'd get to a point where I don't know anyone's name. I just don't. It's too hard, and not too hard. It's impossible. So it's a work in progress, as everything is. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, and check out Adam wrote a book called The Fruit Hunters, which if you like that article, you will enjoy.
Hi, I have a question for Dave. In the most recent issue of Lucky Peach, you warned that dark days are coming in the culinary world.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about what you think about that? And do you mainly attribute that to the Food Network, that celebrity type of culture that has pervaded the world, culinary schools, or just
I think
things are different now?
Things are different now, and I don't think you can contribute. I'm pretty not pessimistic. I'm pretty pessimistic, yeah. About the future of the culinary world, particularly fine dining. I don't necessarily love fine dining. It's not that I don't love it. I don't want to eat it every day. I think that it's extraordinarily important that we continue to have the intensity of fine dining to teach cooks. So the loss of fine dining restaurants, the loss of, how should I say? I use this example a lot. Like if you were an actor, if you were a star football player in high school, you sort of know what's at the end of the tunnel if you happen to be successful at it. You know that there's fame and fortune and media, whatever, so you're a bit prepared for it. And when I started to cook, or the generation before me, and obviously everyone before that, that never existed. You just cooked, and maybe one day you were going to be good enough to have your own restaurant if somebody was lucky enough to give you that opportunity. Now, with the internet and with TV, you can't blame cooks, but now that option is available to them. So like an athlete, they know that if they happen to be good at it, or not even good at it, they're going to be able to gain some notoriety or fame, and it's changed everything. And the 40-hour work week has changed everything as well. I think that I was talking to the head of Brown University's medical department, And he was saying, I was asking basically, are we producing better doctors now than we were in the past? And he said, no, basically no. He didn't think so. Not in the sense that they're worse. Kids aren't less intelligent or less motivated, it's just that the system's changed. They're more concerned about life-work balance. And when he was a medical resident, he worked 100, 120 hours a week in like 3 day or like 2-3 day shifts. Now it's regimented like 8-10 hours a day. Even if you wanted to work 100 hours a week at a hospital, you wouldn't be allowed to, particularly because of the insurance and the liability that you could you could accidentally kill somebody. And I've spoken to other professional, like a very well-known person in the medical field, and he basically said it's a good thing, that doctors aren't working those hours because it causes fatigue and it's not good. But the one agreement that I have, I think, from these two esteemed gentlemen in the medical profession is that they feel that you lose intuition. You lose the ability to know how to cook. And he said, one of them was like, everybody wants to become a ophthalmologist and specialized doctors, and nobody wants to become a surgeon anymore. Partly because there's a system in place that makes them better. The technology makes the doctors better than they actually are. And I feel that if that's happening at the highest level of education in this country, why wouldn't it affect it's not the lowest, but a field that is certainly lower in craftsmanship and skill than being a medical doctor. There's certainly a lot more to know and to do. And if that's affecting the highest field, why wouldn't it affect the culinary field? So if you just really look at the hours you're supposed to work, I think that's really put you can't learn how to cook in 40 hours a week. You can't. Can you guys do your job in 40 hours a week? Less? But for most people, you can't. But you guys are on salary and Google makes a ton of money, right? But for the most part, cooking, you don't make a lot of money. So you have to be able to, you got to work more, and you do it for the love of it. And if you're unable to work more, I don't know how much, right? But I think it's really important for cooks that are starting out to really immerse themselves in it as much as possible. And right now we have a system and a culinary culture that prohibits that. So things are changing. And for that reason, I'm pessimistic. So it's not nothing against younger cooks in what do they call them, the millennial generation? It's not their fault. Somebody has to figure out and devise a better way to teach, and that's our job as chefs and cooks. We have to teach, and it's becoming more and more difficult to teach. And I'll just add one more thing. Like, we have a lab, and we're doing I think some cool stuff with fermentation and new techniques, and just learning is a good thing. And I had a cook that was like, hey, he was talking to the head of the lab. He's like, I would love to learn what you guys are working in the lab, and they were like, come in on Wednesday. We have open office hours. We'd love to teach you, tell you what we were doing. He's like, that's my day off. I can't do that. And if you don't have that, we can't force them to do it. We can build I don't know. I'm actually completely flabbergasted and trying to figure out how to encourage people to want to learn more and to want to be passionate about cooking. And it's something that I love a lot and I care a lot about, and it's extraordinarily troublesome to me to I think it should, people should be excited about it on their own. They would want to learn, but I don't know what to do.
It's a very pessimistic view.
Well,
What's the 40-hour work week in kitchens? Because that's not something I've ever heard of being reality before.
well, the 40-hour work week, usually in New York and even in California, you work 40 hours, and and then after 40 hours, you get overtime. In California, I think it's like 2.5. What is it? Time and a half. That's crazy. The margins in a restaurant are so small, and it's so hard just staffing out a restaurant. And then if you have to pay a cook time and a half and give them like a lunch break, it's crazy. Like, you need people to work. Kitchens don't have the luxury of overstaffing.
Well, when you came up, it was shift pay, right?
Yes, you basically worked.
And so is there like a shift between, like, restaurants don't do shift pay anymore, they do hourly pay?
Well, shift
like,
pay is
'cause
illegal.
I mean, like, I know some line cooks, and they don't work even close to 40-hour weeks.
Right, I'm not saying everyone does, right? But for the most part, it's headed that direction. And again, if you step away from what we're at, because the culinary world and everything that's happening is happening at such a rapid pace, I don't think we have the perspective to really see what the hell's happening. We don't have the time frame to have reflection of what is happening. So you have to look at other cultures. Look at what happened to Europe with the 40-hour, I think it was a 36-hour work week. It literally killed dining in France. I mean, there are restaurants that continue to employ people and work at longer hours, but for the most part, if you have the majority of a country or the majority of an industry working a set of hours, it eventually diminishes the talent pool. It diminishes your workforce. And no, not everybody does, but maybe are they hourly employees, your friends?
I actually am not sure.
That's where you have a sous chef and you work a lot. You work a lot of hours.
So I'm going to end it with a more optimistic question. I have an 11-pound Mongolisa pork shoulder in my refrigerator right now. What would you recommend I do with it? Should I just make a Bosam?
It's a really easy recipe. And
I know.
Mongolisa is a type of pig from Germany, I believe.
Is that the furry pig?
The furry woolly
From
pig.
Hungary.
It's like a woolly, yeah, Hungary. And it's got extraordinarily well-marbled fat in it, and it's just a delicious type of pig. And it was like a lost breed or something, and it came back. And it's really expensive, so yeah, I'd throw a party.
But when there's so much fat, like the simpler the better, right? And that's why I thought of the Bosam recipe.
Well, there's only so much you can do with the pork shoulder,
Yeah.
right? Because it's a little bit sinewy. Like, you could slice it thin enough to cook like thin steaks of it, but for the most part, you need to cook, if you're going to cook it whole, long enough where, the sinew and some of the muscle tissue is going to break down, and that's how you're going to get that sort of braised meat sensation.
And do you have any tips that's not in your cookbook for that recipe?
It's simple
Yeah.
and stupid.
Just-
Salt, sugar.
Yeah.
I can't screw it up.
You can, but the likelihood of it happening is pretty low.
Yeah.
Especially, just put it in, and 6-7 hours later, 300 degrees, you should be ready to go, even if it's 11 pounds. So,
All right, I'll throw a party. Thank you.
thank you guys.
Thanks for having us.